Junji Ito is considered to be one of the most prolific horror mangakas of the modern day. His grotesque and otherworldly imagery, paired with his Lovecraftian style of storytelling, makes for a unique reading experience that's unlike anything else. Ito has a very distinctive style, one that many other horror mangakas have tried to replicate to various degrees of success. But undoubtedly, when you read a Junji Ito story, there's a clear and distinctive feel to it that's kind of hard to explain. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I consider all of Ito's work to be perfect. In fact, there's a few of his mangas that I really didn't care for, but none of it is forgettable. And that's an amazing achievement in itself that often gets overlooked when talking about Ito's massive collections of work. Of course, Junji Ito is known primarily for horror. Uzumaki and Tomui are considered by many to be two of Ito's most terrifying stories. In fact, Uzumaki is often talked about as one of, if not the greatest horror manga of all time. I think there is, to a certain degree, an undeniable truth to these claims. However, if you ever talk to someone who has read more than one Junji Ito manga, you will often get a different answer as to what they consider to be his scariest. This is because Ito likes to write about different phobias and ideas. What's scary to one person may not be scary to another. So when you ask the question, what's the scariest Junji Ito manga, you're going to get a lot of different answers. Now, if you were to ask a different question, like, what is the grossest Junji Ito manga, then there is a very clear answer to that question. Don't get me wrong, there are a few Ito stories that are downright disgusting. Gyo could certainly be a contender for this category. Layers of Fear had a couple of gross out moments, and even Uzumaki's baby chapter is pretty hard to get through. But in my humble opinion, none of these hold a candle to the manga we're going to be talking about today, Glyceride. Glyceride, or Greased as it's called in some translations, is a pretty infamous Junji Ito story. There's a moment in this manga that, I kid you not, some people can simply just not get through no matter how many times they've tried to read it. I guess you can consider this a test. If you make it all the way through this video, then you have a stronger stomach than some. Though, fair warning before we get started here. If you've eaten anything in the last couple of hours, then there's a chance you might be seeing it again very soon. In the town where Yui, our main character, lives, you can see Mount Fuji off in the distance. Every day after school, Yui walks to the same patch of grass. It sits underneath the same tree while she stares at Mount Fuji. She says that sitting down and looking at the mountain makes her feel safe. It makes everything feel fresh and clean for her. This is the only joy Yui has anymore. She dreads the thought of having to go home afterwards. The beautiful mountain scenery is a far cry from the home in which Yui lives. Yui and her family live on top of a yakiniku barbecue restaurant her father runs. The ventilation is horrible, and Yui's father doesn't make enough money to get it fixed, so all the greasy air from the barbecue wafts up into their home. Because of this, there's a thick layer of slimy yellowish grease that covers everything from the walls to the furniture. All of their clothes, blankets, and towels are soaked in grease. They've given up trying to do laundry. No matter how many times they try and wash their clothes, they just become soaked again soon after. Yui's mother used to clean every inch of the home constantly, but she's been gone for a long time now. It's never directly said what happened to her, but it's implied that she got fed up from cleaning oil all day and just left. To make matters worse, Yui's father is a very greasy man even without the fumes from the barbecue restaurant. He has a very strong odor that Yui can barely stand. She also has an older brother named Goro. Goro is a very troubled boy. He likes to pick on Yui when their father isn't home. He pulls her hair and puts her in headlocks. Goro also has this strange habit. When he thinks no one's home, he likes to sneak into the kitchen cabinets and drink salad oil like it's water. This has been going on for a while now. Yui has caught Goro doing this on multiple occasions. One time, Goro actually caught Yui spying on him. Yui is told that if she tells their father what he's doing with the salad oil, there will be repercussions. Yui is at her breaking point. Between her father's off-putting smell, getting picked on by her brother, and her entire home being covered in grease, she doesn't know how much more of this hell she can take. Naturally, Yui has grown to despise the grease. She can't stand the smell or look of it. But there's nowhere she can go in her home to escape it. Over time, Yui has learned how to measure the concentration of oil in the air around her. It's her sixth sense. She calls it the oil index. The current oil index in this room is 50%. The oil index is 50%. Please take care with any open flames. Recently, Goro has started growing pimples on his face. This is common for a boy of Goro's age. However, due to all the grease around him, and probably due in part to his bizarre habit of drinking salad oil, Goro's acne is far worse than any of his other classmates. He tries to pop his zits in hopes that they will go away. but with each passing day his acne just gets worse. Goro often gets picked on at school. The other boys throw him around while they ridicule him for his face and oily clothes. They call him names like Pizza Face and the Living Volcano. Yui sees the torment Goro goes through, and despite how he treats her, she can't help but feel sorry for her big brother. He has to live in that home too. Undoubtedly, it's been hard on him as well. After school, Goro accuses Yui of laughing at him just like all the other kids do. He starts kicking her while their father attempts to pull Goro off. Goro blames his dad for his acne, saying it's his fault that his body has been contaminated with dirty oil. Goro tries to fight his father, but the two just end up tumbling over each other on the slippery, greasy floor. After this, Goro becomes a recluse. He stops going to school. Now he just stays in his room all day and drinks salad oil. This makes his acne even worse. Now his entire face is covered in giant pus-filled zits. Goro complains that he can't sleep on his futon because it feels too oily. He starts squeezing his head out of frustration. This makes some of Goro's pimples pop. Some of the pus from Goro's pimples hits Yui in the face and hands. Gross is the only word she can muster up. An understatement, if anything. This upsets Goro. What? You said gross just now, didn't you? So that's it. My oily skin's that disgusting, huh? Well then, I'll let you have a big ol' taste. Goro pins Yui to the ground and sits on top of her. He squeezes his head until a stream of oily yellow pus starts to leak out of every pimple on his face. Hopefully, no one was in the mood for ramen before they clicked on this video. You can see the pus leak from his fingers and run down his hands. Yui screams as Goro's nasty secretions fall to her face and into her eyes and mouth. How do you like that? The oil cooked in my live volcano. Goro tells Yui that he'll get his revenge on her and everyone else who ever made fun of him. He wants to kill every single person who's ever laughed at him, starting with Yui. He starts choking her while the greasy pus starts to roll down her face. He's going to kill her. That is until Yui's father comes and knocks Goro out with a frying pan, inadvertently killing him. Yui helps her father move Goro's body so he can dispose of it without alerting the authorities. A few weeks later, we see that business at the restaurant has gone way up. There's a new delicious meat on the menu that everyone's talking about. Hundreds of new customers from all over come to try this new exotic fatty meat that's said to be unlike anything else out there. Unfortunately, so many people have been ordering this new meat that the restaurant has run out. All the new buzz around the restaurant has caused more grease than usual to waft up in Yui's apartment. The oil index is currently 70%. Around this time, Yui starts to have a strange recurring dream. In this dream, Yui's staring at Mount Fuji again, but this time, the volcano is active. It erupts, but it's not lava that comes out of it. It's oil. Soon, the entire city is flooded. Just like the inside of Yui's home, everything outside is now covered in a thick layer of hot grease. The oil index in the city is currently 90%. The oil index is 90%. Please take sufficient care with open flames. After she starts getting these nightmares, Yui no longer sees any beauty when she looks at Mount Fuji. Now, she looks like one of Goro's giant zits. Soon after, likely from a combination of stress and her living conditions, Yui starts getting pimples just like Goro. She locks herself in her room just like Goro did. She even snaps at her father whenever he tries to check up on her. That night, Yui has another nightmare of drowning in oil. This time, though, she wakes up to find her father force-feeding her salad oil while she sleeps. Yui now realizes that her dream is from her father coming in every night and feeding her oil. He's trying to fatten her up. Likely, so he'll have more meat for the restaurant. This is why Yui has started breaking out. After this, she stays up every night to look out for her father. Now, without any of Goro's meat left, Yui's father was forced to close the restaurant. This causes him to spiral. Now he's the one drinking salad oil. Even with the restaurant being temporarily closed, the oil index didn't drop one bit. In fact, it's actually the highest it's ever been. The father's skin has gotten even greasier now that he's drinking the salad oil. The grease just seeps out of his pores like sweat. Every time Yui gets close to her dad, the oil index skyrockets. It's gotten so bad that oil has started to drip from the ceiling, making it feel like Yui was caught in a greasy rainstorm. The oil index is steadily over 90% and higher. One night, after Yui stays up to watch out for her father, she hears a loud banging coming from the kitchen. She goes down to investigate. In the kitchen, she finds that her father has cut off his own leg. Strangely, what comes out from her dad's leg isn't blood, it's oil. The current oil index is 100%. The oil index is 100%. This is where the story ends. If you've made it this far, then give yourself a round of applause. I'm sure there's a few that didn't. When talking about the story, Ito said Glyceride was a collection of unpleasant things that he had experienced throughout his life. In particular, Ito recounts his time in dental school when he had to sleep on an old dirty futon while studying in a Buddhist temple. The dental technician school I went to in Nagoya was a Buddhist corporation, so there was also Buddhist study. We stayed over this temple for a few days. Naturally, we also did the cleaning inside the temple and on the temple grounds, but the most difficult thing was when we had to go to sleep at night. The futons they had at the temple hadn't been aired out for who knew how many years, like they were fermenting them inside the humid closets, and they were stained solid brown from the sweat of Buddhist students, and had wrinkles that were hardened in places. Ito also suffered from severe acne when he was a young boy. He remembers trying to pop the zits on his forehead, but this would only make his acne worse. One of the coolest things about Junji Ito to me is how he takes real-life inspiration and uses them for his stories. He can take something like a nightmare or a distinct childhood memory and twist them into something horrifying. In particular, his time as a dental technician has certainly inspired a lot of his work. Something I find massively disappointing when I watch other people talk about Junji Ito is that they almost never analyze his work beyond a rudimentary level. At first glance, a story like Glyceride might not seem to offer much in terms of analysis, but that's simply not true. In fact, I would argue that Glyceride is one of Ito's more impressive works. First, there's the grease that covers the entire house. To me, this is clearly an allegory about how the home of a broken family can often feel dirty and toxic in the eyes of a child. In these times, it's not uncommon for said child to go out and try and find something they can feel solace in away from home. But even that can become ugly too if the problems at home continue to linger on in the child's mind. The grease is Yui's personal hell. The house feels claustrophobic to her. There's literally nowhere she can go to escape it. We also see how each member of the family reacts to the grease differently. Yui's mom likely gave up and decided to leave the family. Her father stayed around, but the burden of trying to keep his restaurant afloat eventually made him give up too. Goro decides to lash out at the world that he feels has wronged him. No one in this story is necessarily bad or evil. They're just trying to cope with their unfortunate reality. When it starts to rain inside of Yui's house, this undoubtedly conjures up the image of a dark cloud, the idea that misfortune will follow you no matter where you go. A pretty pessimistic outlook, even by Ito's standards. Unfortunately, that's just how it is sometimes. Not everyone gets a chance to escape. Something I find fascinating about Ito as an author is how pulverizing his work can often be. Like I said earlier, he likes to play off different phobias and ideas. What's scary to me may not be scary to you. Likewise, what's gross to me may not be gross to you. Though I stand by the fact that this is probably his most disgusting story. But it is possible a select few got through this no problem at all. And that's ultimately why I love talking about Junji Ito. I love hearing what other people have to say about him. So, I decided to do something a little different for this video. Today, we have a special guest. If you have watched any manga-related content on YouTube, then you have likely heard of The Masked Man. He makes awesome manga-related videos. His one on PTSD Radio is my personal favorite. I asked him what he thought of the story, and this is what he had to say.
When it comes to grease or glyceride, I think it's important to keep in mind that when reading this type of story, nothing really changes in terms of the external factors. You are sitting down just as you were beforehand. Your clothes are the same, what you were probably drinking or eating is the same. The only thing that would have changed is how much is there. But after reading this story, you get this immediate feeling of filth, as if you need to immediately enter an anti-contamination center, take multiple showers, and then really be on top of your skincare. It had admittedly been a while since I had checked out the Junji Ito catalog, and so when revisiting this story, it's almost haunting how quickly the feeling on my very own skin had changed. And this is nothing new to Junji Ito, and the reason why is he's so successful as an author, as his ability to delve in all different types of horror and fears on different levels is nothing short of impressive. Whether it's a story like this with puss and grease oozing out of every orifice of a human being, a bunch of holes across their body, gross fish, zombie, insect-like creatures, which is probably my least favorite visual thing Junji Ito's ever done in any of his stories, or something a lot more dreadful as in Hellstar Remina, which deals a lot more with cosmic horror, which I think that story and a lot of the stories of Junji Ito where the characters are left in sort of this fate worse than death scenario, or the all hope is gone type of situation, are ones that really have stuck with me afterwards, were stories that made me contemplate whether or not there was a rare possibility of something being out there or a fate worse than death itself. Now, his stories in regards to body horror are the ones that more so leave me feeling physically uncomfortable and cringing more often. Again, Shiver, Greased being great examples of this, Geo, Uzumaki. Love Sickness to a certain degree, but not as much with that one. Censor is a fantastic example of cosmic horror mixed with body horror. And so Junji Ito has a lot of stories where you remember vaguely, if you've read the entire catalog, you remember vaguely, some with more detail, some of the grotesque imagery, but it's really the ones that made you feel something that stick with you a lot. And that's always the magic behind this sort of thing. This is an individual who'd be chilling at home with his cats, but he's capable of creating these narratives that make you not only feel uncomfortable walking into a dark room, but leave you scratching yourself or making you feel like you need to splash cold water on your face. And I think that's a piece to the puzzle as to why Junji Ito has been so successful, especially over here in the West. As an artist, he's absolutely brilliant. He knows exactly how many panels to use to properly build something up, leaving a page turner so that, when you turn the page, the giant reveal is given to you in these awesome POV shots or these over-the-shoulder angles, which really help you feel like you are in the story alongside the characters or in the shoes of the characters observing the events that are going down. It is this combination of a memorable art style and efficiency while doing so, and the powerful impact he's able to create with so many different stories in such a large catalog relative to other manga authors that has allowed him to stand out not only as a horror mangaka, but instead he stands out as an icon of the medium as a whole regardless of genre.
In the off chance you aren't already subscribed to The Masked Man, I'm going to link his channel down below in the description, and I'd like to once again thank him for agreeing to being in this video. He actually reached out to me first, which was such an awesome experience and pretty crazy considering that I'm a considerably smaller channel compared to him, but I'm really appreciative for it. If you made it this far, I'd like you to comment on what your favorite Junji Ito story is. If you want to know mine, I actually made a video about that a real long time ago. And yeah, that's gonna be pretty much it. See ya.